May 26, 1941, 10:10 in the morning, 600 nautical miles west of Brest, France. Ensign Leonard B. Smith, United States Navy, is flying a British Catalina on autopilot through broken cloud at 500 feet. The United States is neutral. Smith is not supposed to be here. He is one of 17 American aviators secretly embedded with RAF Coastal Command, a program President Roosevelt concealed from Congress. The sea below is empty. It has been empty for 31 hours. The German battleship Bismarck sank HMS Hood 3 days ago and then disappeared. The entire home fleet is searching for her. Smith looks out the port window and sees a dark shape on the water. He disengages the autopilot, banks the aircraft for a closer look, and the sky around him fills with flak. This is the story of how a slow, ugly, obsolete-looking flying boat, dismissed as primitive by the men who flew faster aircraft, found more enemy fleets than any other reconnaissance machine of the Second World War. By 1933, the United States Navy had a problem that no existing aircraft could solve. War Plan Orange, the American contingency plan for a Pacific war against Japan, had been refined for almost 2 decades. Every version of the plan reached the same conclusion. Any war across the Pacific would be decided by long-range ocean scouting. The Pacific is 63 million square miles of water. The Navy needed an aircraft that could fly 3,000 miles, loiter for an entire day, and find a fleet in that emptiness. The existing patrol aircraft could not do it. The Consolidated PBY and the Martin P-3M were biplanes with open cockpits, fabric-covered wings, and ranges under 2,000 miles. Their crews flew freezing in leather helmets. They could barely reach the edge of the combat radius that War Plan Orange demanded. Rear Admiral Ernest J. King, then Chief of the Bureau of Aeronautics, wanted them replaced before they even entered squadron service. They were obsolete before they were delivered. On October 28, 1933, the Bureau of Aeronautics issued a specification: 3,000-mile range, 100 miles per hour cruise, a monoplane flying boat. The requirement went to 2 manufacturers. Douglas responded with the XP-3D. Consolidated assigned the project to its chief engineer, Isaac Macklin Ladden, a quiet designer who preferred slide rules to speeches. Ladden had already built the P-2Y. He understood exactly what had been wrong with it. His response was the Model 28. It was unlike anything else flying. A single parasol wing mounted on a streamlined pylon above the fuselage. Internal wing bracing instead of drag-producing struts. Retractable wingtip floats that folded up in flight to become the wingtips themselves. Integral fuel tanks built into the wing structure rather than strapped externally. On paper it looked strange. In the wind tunnel it was clean. Consolidated won the contract on price. $90,000 per airframe against Douglas at $110,000. Chief Test Pilot William B. Wheatley took the prototype, designated XP-3Y1, up from Hampton Roads, Virginia, on March 21, 1935. Wheatley pushed the aircraft hard through early trials. He would die in 1939 when a production Catalina broke up in flight during a test dive, a painful loss for Consolidated that shaped every structural revision that followed. 7 months after the first flight, under Lieutenant Commander Knefler McGinnis, the prototype flew from Norfolk to San Diego non-stop, 3,443 miles in 34 hours 45 minutes, a world record for its class. The Navy had bought exactly what it asked for. The production aircraft was designated PBY, Patrol Bomber, Consolidated. It entered service with Patrol Squadron 11 in October 1936. The definitive wartime variants were the PBY-5 flying boat and the PBY-5A amphibian, the latter fitted with a retractable tricycle undercarriage that allowed it to operate from land or water interchangeably. 2 Pratt & Whitney R-1830 twin Wasp radial engines of 1,200 horsepower each. Wingspan 104 feet, longer than a B-17 Flying Fortress. Length 63 feet 10 inches. Empty weight 20,910 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight 35,420 pounds. Top speed 196 miles per hour. Cruise 125. Service ceiling 15,800 feet. Range 2,520 miles with internal fuel. Recorded maximum endurance 31 hours 45 minutes. A crew of 8 to 10 armed with 330 caliber and 250 caliber machine guns, 4,000 pounds of bombs, depth charges, or 2 torpedoes. The numbers that mattered were the slow numbers. The Catalina cruised at 125 miles per hour. A Messerschmitt Bf 109 cruised at 300. A Zero could run circles around it. Test pilots called the controls heavy. Pilots called it the Dumbo, after the Disney elephant, or less charitably, the flying pig. One early Royal Navy assessment noted the aircraft would be hopelessly vulnerable to any modern fighter. Early combat confirmed it. In December 1941, 6 Catalinas of Patrol Wing 10 attacked Japanese shipping at Jolo in the Philippines. 4 of the 6 were shot down. The commanding officer of Patrol Squadron 22, Lieutenant Commander Frank O'Bairn, wrote a brutal assessment afterward. He reported that the aircraft was effective only for patrols in areas where the enemy did not have strong aerial concentrations, and that even then, if any enemy planes were present, the Catalina could neither outrun nor outfight the attackers. The critics were not wrong. They were asking the wrong question. They were measuring the Catalina against fighters. The Catalina was not built to fight. It was built to find. The innovative edge was never a single piece of hardware. It was the wing. That long, slow parasol wing, mounted on a pylon high above the fuselage, gave the Catalina something no land-based aircraft could match: endurance, visibility, stability. The wing sat above the crew, not across the cockpit, which meant the pilots and observers had an unbroken view of the horizon from 300 feet down to the water. The slow cruise speed meant the aircraft sipped fuel. A fully loaded Catalina could stay airborne for 20 hours. On a still day, it could land on open water, shut down its engines, and drift. Crews carried a small cigar box of wooden plugs, tapered like pencils, to hammer into any rivets that popped after a rough landing. Flight engineer Cash Barber of Patrol Squadron 11 later told the Smithsonian they were, in his words, about the width of a pencil. For the pilot, it meant you could fly a whole day and night, find a fleet, send one message, and then, if your engines failed, come down in the ocean and live. No other reconnaissance aircraft of the war could do that. If you're finding this interesting, subscribing takes a second and helps the channel. Now to the moment the wing earned its reputation. Back to May 26, 1941. The Catalina over the Atlantic is serial number AH545, squadron code WQZ, of number 209 Squadron RAF Coastal Command, based at Castle Archdale on Lough Erne, Northern Ireland. Her captain is Pilot Officer Dennis A. Briggs, Royal Air Force. Her co-pilot is Ensign Leonard B. Smith, United States Navy. Smith is flying when he sights the Bismarck at 10:10 in the morning. His after-action report is flat. He states that at 10:10 he sighted what was first believed to be Bismarck, bearing 345 degrees at 8 miles. He disengages the autopilot. He closes to confirm. The battleship's anti-aircraft batteries open up with precision. The fitter comes forward and reports the aircraft full of holes. Smith and Briggs get the contact report off. The signal places Bismarck 690 nautical miles northwest of Brest. Within hours, Swordfish torpedo bombers from HMS Ark Royal launch the strike that jams Bismarck's rudders and dooms her to the guns of King George V and Rodney. Smith receives the Distinguished Flying Cross. He is the first American serviceman decorated in the Second World War. He was not supposed to be there. 13 months later, June 3, 1942, the Pacific. A fleet of Catalinas, roughly 32 aircraft drawn from patrol squadrons 23, 24, 44, and 51, fans out from Midway Atoll at dawn. Admiral Chester Nimitz knows from signals intelligence that the Japanese are coming. He does not know exactly where. At approximately 0900 hours local time, Ensign Jewel Harmon Reed, call sign Strawberry 4, of Patrol Squadron 44, the Golden Pelicans, is 8 hours out from Midway at the outer edge of his sector. He sees specks on the horizon. He turns to his co-pilot Ensign Gerald Hardiman and asks, "Do you see what I see?" Hardiman answers, "You're damn right I do." Reed's first transmission is 2 words, sighted main body. Minutes later, bearing 262, distance 700. The contact is Admiral Kondo's occupation force, not the carriers, and Nimitz himself signals the fleet that the main body is elsewhere. But the Japanese are on schedule. That night, the night of June 3 to 4, 4 torpedo-armed Catalinas lift off from Midway to attack the force Reed spotted. The detachment is led by Lieutenant William L. Richards of Patrol Squadron 44. His wingmen are Lieutenant Junior Grade Douglas Davis and Ensign Gaylord Probst of Patrol Squadron 24, and Ensign Alan Rothenberg of Patrol Squadron 51. They fly by dead reckoning through weather, find the Japanese auxiliary force at 1:15 in the morning, and make the first first night aerial torpedo attack in United States Navy history. One torpedo strikes the fleet oiler Akebono Maru. It is the only successful American aerial torpedo hit of the entire Battle of Midway. All 4 crews return. Richards lands at Midway with about 50 gallons of fuel in his tanks. At 0534 on June 4, Lieutenant Howard Parmelli 80 Jr. of Patrol Squadron 23, flying call sign Strawberry 5, breaks through cloud at 1,500 feet and sees 4 Japanese aircraft carriers below him: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, the entire Kido Butai. His first transmission is a single word: aircraft, meaning a Japanese scout. Then at 0534, enemy carriers. At 0552, 2 carriers and main body ships, carriers in front, course 135, speed 25. 11 minutes after 80, at 0545, Lieutenant William A. Chase, also of Patrol Squadron 23, flying the adjacent sector, sends the plainest and most consequential signal of the entire morning. In uncoded English, many planes heading Midway, bearing 320 degrees, distance 150. Midway's radar confirms the incoming strike 8 minutes later. Between the 2 Catalinas, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher now has the bearing of the enemy carriers and confirmation that their strike is already in the air. 4 Japanese carriers will burn before sunset. Over the 10 days that follow, Catalinas land on the open Pacific 13 times to recover 41 downed aviators, including Ensign George Gay, the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8. The Catalina's fleet-finding record does not end at Midway. On April 4, 1942, Royal Canadian Air Force Squadron Leader Leonard Burchell of No. 413 Squadron sighted Admiral Nagumo's carriers bearing down on Ceylon. His crew transmitted the warning before Zeros shot them into the Indian Ocean. 3 of his crew died. Burchell survived the war as a prisoner and was thereafter called the Savior of Ceylon. On December 7, 1941, a Catalina of No. 205 Squadron RAF, captained by Flying Officer Patrick Bedell, sighted the Japanese invasion convoy off Kota Baru, Malaya. Nakajima fighters shot the aircraft down before it could transmit. Bedell and his 7 crewmen became the first Allied airmen killed in the Pacific War. Then slow speed and long endurance, liabilities in daylight, became assets at night. Pearl Harbor had taught the Navy what daylight cost. On December 7, 1941, 68 Catalinas of Patrol Squadrons 11, 12, 14, 22, 23, and 24 were on Oahu. All but about 12 were destroyed or damaged within hours. 27 were lost at Kaneohe alone. The aircraft could not survive where enemy fighters could reach it. The answer was to disappear. In October 1942, crews of Patrol Squadron 11 at Espiritu Santo mixed lamp black and soap and painted their Catalinas matte black. They darkened the national insignia. They fitted flame arresters on the exhaust to hide the blue glow of the engines at night. On December 15, 1942, Patrol Squadron 12, under Commander Clarence Taft, deployed to Henderson Field on Guadalcanal as the first official Black Cat Squadron. Vice Admiral Aubrey Fitch, commanding Aircraft South Pacific Force, oversaw the doctrine that followed. Black Cats carried ASV radar, radio altimeters for masthead height attacks, and a mixed bag of weapons tailored for night work. They attacked Japanese shipping at 50 feet with 500-pound bombs and 5-second delay fuses. They dropped parachute flares to blind anti-aircraft gunners. They dropped empty beer and Coke bottles, which whistled on the way down and made sleep impossible for the crews below. Patrol Squadron 12 completed 6 months on Guadalcanal without losing an officer pilot. Patrol Squadron 11 received the first presidential unit citation ever awarded to a Navy patrol squadron. Aggregate estimates credit Black Cat squadrons with contributing to the sinking of roughly 2.8 million tons of Japanese shipping across the war. In the Atlantic, Catalinas of RAF Coastal Command and United States Navy patrol squadrons closed the mid-Atlantic gap, the stretch of ocean previously beyond air cover, where U-boats had operated with impunity. British and Commonwealth Catalinas are credited with sinking at least 48 U-boats. United States Navy Catalinas accounted for 25 of the 60 Axis submarines killed by Navy patrol aircraft. PBY-5A Bureau No. 2459, Patrol Squadron 73, sank U-464 on August 20, 1942, the first U-boat killed by a United States Navy aircraft, and then sank U-582 on October 5, 1942. 3.5 kills, the highest-scoring United States Navy patrol airframe of the war. That aircraft survives today at the American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts. 2 Victoria Crosses were awarded to Catalina captains. Flying Officer John Alexander Cruikshank of No. 210 Squadron attacked a U-boat on July 17, 1944, was hit in 72 places, lost his navigator, and refused morphine for 5.5 hours until he could land his aircraft back at Sullivan. He died in August 2025 at the age of 105, the last Victoria Cross holder of the Second World War. The honest comparison now. The Catalina was not the best-performing maritime patrol aircraft of the war. The Consolidated B-24 Liberator in its maritime variants cruised at 279 miles per hour, ranged 2,960 miles, and carried 10 50-caliber machine guns and 8,000 pounds of ordnance. The Lockheed Ventura managed 322 miles per hour. The Short Sunderland, the RAF's other great flying boat, carried up to 18 guns and sank more than 28 U-boats. Measured in speed, firepower, or survivability against fighters, the Catalina was inferior to all of them. None of that mattered when the question was, where is the enemy fleet? The B-24 could not land on open water. The Ventura could not loiter for 20 hours. The Sunderland was magnificent, but there were never enough of them. Only the Catalina could fly from a protected lagoon in the Solomons, with no airstrip, no tender, and no alternate for 1,000 miles, search for a day and a night, and drop into the open Pacific to pull 15 burned airmen out of Kavieng Harbor under shore fire, which is exactly what Lieutenant Junior Grade Nathan Green Gordon of Patrol Squadron 34 did on February 15, 1944, earning the only Medal of Honor ever awarded to a Catalina pilot. Air Transport Auxiliary pilot Peter Brown described the handling plainly. He said the Catalina was a very flat-bottom boat, and in a rough sea you could not land it gently. You had to stall it from about 20 feet up, tail down, and flop into the water. It was not elegant. It was not fast. It was the only aircraft in the war that could do the job. The last United States Navy Catalina, a PBY-6A with a Naval Reserve Squadron, was retired on January 3, 1957. Brazil flew them as Amazon transports until 1982. Canada converted them into water bombers that scooped 8,000 pounds of water in 14 to 17 seconds to fight forest fires. The Catalina outlived almost every contemporary. Around 3,300 airframes were built across plants in San Diego, New Orleans, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Vancouver, Montreal, and Taganrog. It was the most produced flying boat in history. Roughly 100 complete airframes survive worldwide. About 8 are still airworthy, including GPBYA, nicknamed Miss Pickup, based at Duxford, the only flying example in Europe. One myth worth ending on. Popular accounts often credit a Catalina with rescuing future President George H.W. Bush after he was shot down near Chichijima on September 2, 1944. He was not rescued by a Catalina. He was pulled from the Pacific by the submarine USS Finback. The Catalina did rescue thousands of other airmen under the code name Dumbo, and one Catalina pilot, Lieutenant Junior Grade Nathan Green Gordon, earned the Medal of Honor for 4 consecutive open ocean landings at Kavieng. The aircraft did not need the Bush story. Its record did not require inflation. The myth is that the Catalina was primitive, slow, obsolete by 1942. The record is the opposite. In 3 critical sightings that decided the naval war, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific, a Catalina provided the first and decisive contact. Bismarck on May 26, 1941. The Kido Butai on June 4, 1942. Nagumo's carriers off Ceylon on April 4, 1942. No other reconnaissance type produced that list. Not the fastest, not the best armed, not the most glamorous. The one that found the enemy and sent the message that moved the fleets. That is why the Catalina is remembered. The Bismarck, the Akebono Maru, the carriers at Midway, U-464. They all learned it at the wrong end of the argument.